Hi, my name is Kimberly, and today I'll be refuting my opponent's claim that outsourcing has a positive impact on the U.S. economy. So his secondary claims that supported this was, 1, outsourcing restructures the American workforce to become more competitive. 2, outsourcing maximizes U.S. companies' revenue and profits, thus increasing the U.S.'s tax revenue and GDP. And 3, outsourcing contributes to globalization of the global economy, allowing the U.S. economy to be internationally competitive and maximize imports and exports. So in my response to his first secondary claim that outsourcing restructures the American workforce to become more competitive is that I do agree that outsourcing creates the American workforce to become competitive. However, I believe this competition is between U.S. workers because of job loss. Whereas my opponent spoke about the retraining of these workers to better compete with those from other countries. Yet, if that were the case and the American workforce were to be gaining these better skills, then why are more jobs still being lost? Jennifer Dozier, a news journalist, stated that between 300,000 and 500,000 U.S. jobs have already been lost due to outsourcing. Many companies have jumped on this bandwagon of offshore outsourcing, leading to a decline in jobs in the American workforce. Alex Latch from the Center of American Progress also states that data from the U.S. Center of Commerce shows that U.S. multinational corporations, meaning the big brand name companies that employ a fifth of all American workers, cut their workforces in the U.S. by 2.9 million during the 2000s, while increasing employment overseas by 2.4 million. Now, as you can see, this constant job loss would cause this competition as between the American workers, because as more jobs go overseas, workers in America have to compete with each other to obtain the existing jobs that are even left. So my response to his secondary claim that outsourcing maximizes U.S. companies' revenue and profits, thus increasing the U.S.'s tax revenue and GDP, is that it does not increase the U.S.'s tax revenue and U.S. profits. Royal Wilberson from the Council on Foreign Relations wrote that federal government loses individual and corporate income tax when multinational firms shift profits to low income to tax and income to low tax countries. So companies like Microsoft and Google, for example, can lower their effective tax rate by moving certain operations overseas to countries like Ireland, which have a nearly zero rate on royalty income, letting them get the better end of the deal. Also, as we all know, manufacturing jobs have by far the greatest impact on national economy. So the money that corresponds to the loss of industrial infrastructure with the closing down of these U.S. factories because jobs are going overseas, then the exporting of capital abroad is not available for U.S. economic expansion. So this money that should be benefiting the economy is ultimately lost and really does nothing to either increase or make better use for U.S. profits. My response to his third secondary claim that outsourcing contributes to globalization and global economy, allowing the U.S. economy to be internationally competitive and maximize imports and exports, is that this is a true statement. However, from the evidence my opponent used, there are some faults. His main evidence for this point came from the book Deep Integration, How Transatlantic Markets Are Leading Globalization, which was written in 2005. He stated from this that the transatlantic employs up to 14 million workers on both sides of the Atlantic. However, instead of showing a decrease in unemployment rate because of jobs that were supposed to be gained, the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed there was actually a 2% increase in the unemployment rates from 2005 through 2012. So in conclusion, outsourcing solves the problem filling low-end, low-paying jobs with individuals from other countries. However, solving the problem creates other problems with which we'll have to cope with in the future, thus creating a negative impact on the U.S. instead of a positive one. Thank you.
All right, the structural stuff is good. At the beginning, I think you've got this interesting argument about what kind of competition that we're going to get, and you tend to shift the focus to the argument that there's going to be competition between workers for jobs as opposed to the companies becoming more competitive. I'm not sure that that's automatically contrary to the advocate's claim, but it does attempt to shift the focus to jobs as being the standard that we measure here. And you ought to tell us a little bit why the other measure doesn't work as well and why this this is a better measure. I think you've got a good argument on why, on how this measure doesn't help us very much, and in fact, it shows that we're falling behind in some way. But the idea that international companies are going to be able to be more competitive, you're almost granting that concept, and I'm not sure that that's going to help you, especially if they show in the long run that kind of growth of the companies would have this boomerang effect and would bring back jobs. For example, where's a demonstration that I think that's a good challenge that you could make on that issue. On the second point, I did like the fact that you had some good analysis here that talked about how if you lose the jobs, that's income tax that you're losing, and that the companies shift their centers overseas to avoid having to pay the taxes, which fits in exactly with the criticism that you're talking about. I think that works really well. And then you've got that part of the argument that talks about the manufacturing jobs being exported, and that's really the thing that causes the problem. So even if the companies get more competitive, that doesn't mean that manufacturing jobs are going to come back here. It means that the companies might be more profitable, but not necessarily employing more people, certainly not in the U.S. And the globalization issue, if you're going to go ahead and grant the point, I'm not sure what the value of challenging the advocate's evidence is, except that you do attempt to diminish whether or not there is some advantage to this by talking about unemployment rates, and that's okay. I think that worked pretty well. And you do a nice job presenting it, so that's all solid. Thank you.